Hey everyone, welcome back to the Path to Freedom podcast. Today I'm joined by Rocky Lalvani, the one and only Profit Answer Man. What's up, Rocky?
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. We've gotten to know each other a little bit over the years, and I know I've thoroughly enjoyed it. This is your second time, I believe, on my podcast. First time was, I don't know, at least a couple years ago. So thankfully we have a few more listeners today than we did back then. So I think a lot of folks will be getting an introduction to you today. And then you do a great podcast yourself, the Profit Answer Man. And you were gracious enough to invite me to your podcast as well. So I've had a lot of fun doing that and getting to know you a little bit. And man, your area of expertise is something that every business owner should be looking at, thinking about. Any aspiring business owner, that's a lot of my audience. The things that you're teaching are principles and strategies that they should be implementing from day one in their business. And it's just one of these things that so many business owners don't do a great job of, really prioritizing profit in their business. And that's what you're all about. So, but before I steal too much of your thunder, introduce yourself, tell the audience a little bit about what you do and how you're able to help the small business owner clients that you work with.
So, as you said, we are Profit First certified firm. And so we help people implement Profit First. But beyond that, we really help them to figure out how to build a business that serves them, that pays them, that isn't a pain, right? Um, that's fun to do, that cash flows, that works in conjunction with what their dreams were when they started. And all of that literally comes down to understanding the metrics,
Mhm.
understanding how they go together, and knowing where the leverage points are. And when you can do that and you can look at it objectively, it actually becomes pretty simple to know, what do I need to work on in my business and where should I focus to make more money?
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what we do.
Yeah, it's kind of mind blowing though how so many small business owners are not looking at it that way, and I've been guilty of this myself. Still am guilty of it in some instances where we overcomplicate things. We're not prioritizing the things that we probably should be in our business, especially if the goal is, hey, I want to make a great income and have a great lifestyle at the same time. I mean, the type of work I do. I consult with people that are considering business ownership and want to look at different franchise opportunities, and we work through a process. And every single person that comes to me, their motivations are, yes, partly tied to financial outcome, right? They're looking to put themselves in a situation where they can earn more maybe than they are as a salaried employee, where they're kind of capped. But I think the bigger motivation for the vast majority of the people I work with and have been able to help is lifestyle, right? And then we all know business owners that 2-3 years into it, they're working harder than they were as an employee. They have very little flexibility or freedom. And maybe even if they're making more money than they were, they're not really getting that lifestyle component out of it. And the things that you teach, I think, go a long way to help people actually get out of business ownership what they were looking to get out of it when they first started that journey.
And that's literally what it's all about. It's helping them actually achieve that goal. I think they go into it and they might know how to do what it is that they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
or they're getting involved in a franchise where they show them how to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
But none of that really focuses on, how do I operate a business as a business owner, not a business operator?
Yes.
And that's kind of the shift that we have. We help people become business owners of businesses that cash flow and that don't require the owner to constantly be involved in all the firefighting.
Yep. Yeah. I like the way you phrase it. Be a business owner, not an operator. I talk a lot about, working on your business instead of in your business. And a lot of times, that's a transition to get there, right? Not everyone is going to be able to start off, without being in that operator role in some capacity. But, if you're doing the right things in your business and building out the right types of systems and processes, and depending on the business, hiring the right people, delegating appropriately, the goal should absolutely be to get to that place where you are the owner, not the operator. Do you specialize in certain types of businesses, or are you able to help just about any type of small business owner? We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but if you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode.
Technically, we can help any small business owner because the principles we use are universal.
Right.
We tend not to want to work with businesses that don't have a path to profitability.
Right. Well, yeah,
Well,
that would make sense.
you say it funny, but I mean, there are a lot of what we call popular businesses that people get involved with that it's almost impossible to make money. So,
Yeah, I believe it.
classic example is somebody selling a commodity on Amazon. And by
Oh,
commodity, it
yeah,
might be
yeah.
Nike sneakers,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But most businesses don't have the margin to be able to do that because Amazon is the one making all the money.
Yep.
And there's hundreds of examples of that. It might even be a retail store that when you look at the retail store, there's not enough population in the area,
Yep.
wrong demographic of population. The product is not maybe of interest. There's a new bubble tea store that opened up by us. They're
Oh,
opening
they're
up all
everywhere.
over.
They're
They are.
everywhere.
But here's the thing that blew my mind. I walked by the window. I haven't gone in. I am not a bubble tea fan. No big deal.
Yeah.
They probably got 900 square feet in front of the counter, and there are 2 tables. So I'm looking in here, and it's wide open.
It's wasted space.
It is a ton of wasted space. This store literally could have run on a third of the space that they have.
Yeah. Yep.
Which means I don't know how they're going to make money
Yep.
because they've got too much overhead in that particular situation.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Or the other problem is when there's too much competition. And then unless you know how to differentiate yourself, it becomes very difficult to do so. And then the other thing is, let's face facts. It takes time to build a business. And if you don't have enough cash
Yeah.
to get through that initial hurdle to take off, then you're just destined for failure.
Yeah, I think statistically, that's the number one reason that small businesses fail or don't make it past their second year in business is because they were undercapitalized. So that's very common. On the competition piece, other than having some clear differentiators and ways that you can add value to your customers in a way that your competition can't or can't do as well. If you're assessing a business opportunity and you're looking at the competitive landscape in that industry or your specific market, like what are some ways that someone can make that assessment whether or not there is in fact too much competition? Because it's tricky, I think, for a lot of people. I have these types of conversations all the time with people as they're looking at different franchise businesses, naturally they're going to look to see, okay, well, who's in my area already doing this? And on one hand, if you don't see anyone doing it, that could be a red flag, right? Is there enough demand for this? Because there's no one doing it. But certainly there can be such a thing as too much competition, or a market that's already too saturated.
I am not an expert at demographic numbers, but I can tell you, if you look at the big franchises, a McDonald's, a Starbucks, they know what they need traffic wise,
Yeah.
and they know what will or will not suffice. A lot of the smaller businesses never even bother to do even some simple basic math to say, hey, is this worthwhile? For example, I'm helping one person who they're in the franchise business, they do painting.
Hmm.
And the way that the market by the franchisor was derived was, hey, you have X amount of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but yet when we look at that, you go, wait a minute, while there might be 100,000 people in this geography, 25,000 is C-class property or low income property or not a great neighborhood.
Yeah.
These
Or it could
people
be
are,
people that rent, live in apartments, that
yeah,
aren't
it
going to
could
spend
be,
money to paint anything.
none of these people are going to buy from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's not a real market. Now, at the same thing, hey, this particular market has all $1 million plus homes. Okay. Now the question is, can you show yourself as the type of company that a $1 million homeowner would want to do business with?
Sure. Yeah.
If you can do that, and if you have the ability to meet their demands, and you can hire people who the owner of a $1 million home would have comfort in bringing
Yeah.
that painter in the
Yep.
front door,
That's important.
then you know what? It's a great business plan.
Yeah.
Um, the reality is you can always make business wherever you are, but you've got to make sure your business plan, cost structure, programs actually work for the market that you serve. And that it's gonna well, let's just call it math out. That
Right.
means that the numbers will all come together. It's not like, oh, in order for this to work, 80% of the people in this geography have to buy from me.
Yeah.
Well, that's impossible.
That's an uphill battle for sure. Yeah,
That's
I think
an
the
uphill
takeaway is,
battle.
do some good due diligence before. Like, you don't want to have some of these things come out after the fact. And the painting franchise example is a good one, because there's definitely some of those industries out there where you're going to look around and you're going to see a ton of quote unquote competitors. And you'll see franchises define what a territory or a market is differently. In my experience, the better franchise companies are going a lot deeper into the demographic analysis than just saying, hey, you have a territory that's 200,000 people. If it's a painting company, or take a pool cleaning company, for example, you're going to be buying territory based off of a certain number of households that have a pool, and the average household income is above a certain number, right? So you're at least doing a little bit deeper analysis to say, all right, you should feel pretty confident that you have a large enough market of relevant prospective customers to go and build the type of business that you're looking for. And then the differentiators is so key in those types of businesses, right? And that's where a good franchise can add a lot of value, right? If they have the systems, the processes, the technology, help with hiring, help with training, all of that's gonna, for especially the higher end customer, probably resonate with them more than the guy driving around in a 15 passenger van with a magnet slapped on the side of it, which is what a lot of the competition actually ends up being, if you're just doing a Google search and see there's 50 other painters in your market. You gotta go a little bit deeper than that. But yeah, there's a lot that needs to be looked at. And like I said, you want to do your best to avoid big surprises after you've already invested the money and the time to start operating the business.
And that is very correct. And the other thing is, what are the barriers to entry?
Yeah.
How easy is it for somebody to compete against you? And that's one of the complaints I get a lot, especially in the trades, is
Yeah.
there's always somebody cheaper.
Hmm.
And our attitude is that's okay. We're not going to fight against them. We're
Yeah.
going to go look for the small part of the market that's willing to pay a premium.
Hmm.
And that's who we're going to go after, because who wants to race to the bottom? It's And the problem is that these contractors will come in, they'll work for a year or two, they'll mess everything up, and then they're gone. But then the guy's like, yeah, but he left and two more came in.
Right. It does. It has any of those trades, industries. That's a big part of it. And if you're going to get into that business, you need to really understand, like we've already talked about, how you can differentiate yourself. And if you take like painting as an example, again, there's only but so many ways to paint a house, right? So the work itself, or the technique itself, you're probably not going to have but so much room to differentiate yourself. So it's really from a service standpoint, from a, how do you present yourself to the customers? How do you interact with the customers? Do you have good communication? In this day and age, most consumers want to be able to schedule things online from a website or an app. They want to get text messages instead of phone calls. Like, can you allow your customers to interact with you the way that they would prefer to, and the way they're accustomed to interacting with most of the other businesses that they're purchasing from? And then you just need to really know, like, all right, who is the customer that we want? We don't want the person that's just looking for the cheapest option. Who do we really want to work with? And then how do we get in front of them? And what's the message that's going to resonate with them to get them to engage with us? And if you can figure that out, the low cost competitors shouldn't be too much of an issue. You probably won't actually cross paths with them all that much. And I see in some of these trades, businesses, like in the franchise world, painting's an example, roofing is an example. I see it in fencing. There's a number of these businesses where the kind of prescribed model, for the franchise owner is subcontract out your labor. And a lot of times the subcontractors end up being these, what would be your low cost competitors. And that works because typically these low cost competitors have no clue how to market themselves. They have no professional sales process. So their biggest challenge is keeping their calendar full, right? And so if you can come in under the framework of a good franchise that's got branding and a good marketing and advertising strategy, all the other systems that we already kind of touched on, you're really in a sales and marketing business as the franchisee. And chances are you're going to be able to find someone that already knows painting or knows roofing to come in and do the labor. And that can work good for those companies too, because they get to do what they know how to do, and they don't have to worry about the stuff that they don't know how to do. And that's the biggest hindrance in their business. We'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode.
That's very true. All of this really comes down to one simple thing. before you begin, think.
Yes.
Like, sit down and have an honest conversation with yourself
Hmm.
about what do you want, and then have an honest look at the numbers and say, "Is this doable?" And if the math works and people say, "Yes, that's reasonable," then go for it. But a lot of times, I think people don't just take those 2 simple
I think
steps.
a lot of times people have an idea for a business. They kind of become enamored with it, right? And they're just, hey, this sounds like it would be a great business,
A
and I'm gonna do
billion-dollar
it.
business.
$1 million business, right? That's always the benchmark that everyone wants to get to. And that can come from a number of different ways. Like, one of the things I hear so commonly when I'm talking to people that are, considering exploring different franchises, because I don't really work with food franchises. Out of hundreds of brands I work with, I could count on one hand the number that are in food and beverage in any capacity. And but I end up talking to a lot of people that's where they kind of started, as it pertains to looking at franchises, was with food. And so all the time I'll talk to someone, they're like, yeah, we were down in Florida on our family vacation. We ate at this great place, absolutely loved it. Then we found out it was a franchise, and man, our area doesn't have anything like this, and we just know it'll crush it. And that's the extent of the research that they've done to say, okay, this is the franchise that we're going to buy. And a lot of times they're not taking into consideration the fact that they have never worked in food service before. They've never owned a restaurant before. We talked about lifestyle earlier, right? They probably have some lifestyle motivators that they're wanting to explore business ownership because of. And generally speaking, restaurants are about the furthest thing from a lifestyle friendly business that you can get. But they don't even really look at all that. They saw a business that they were enamored by, and they thought it would do well in their area, and they're kind of full steam ahead. I see it all the time.
And so I'm guessing in their neighborhood, there's probably lots of restaurants.
Yeah, usually.
So that is issue number 1. Issue
Yep.
number 2 is what you talked about, the lifestyle. Um, Open 7 days, are you open for breakfast, late dinner, employee turnover, massive.
Yeah.
And then the other question is that type of food, while you might like it, is your area accepting of it?
Yeah.
And is it also kind of a seasonal or
Or a fad.
a fad, a travel? We talked about bubble tea.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you have to look at all of these different types of things. It's funny though, in our area, the one thing that's got good traction in the food is there's a couple of pizza places
Hmm.
that everybody's go to for pizza. And that food has a wide variety of
Sure. Yeah. A lot of different
following.
ways you can do
Um,
pizza.
Correct. And so I know with that it is, but a lot of the other ones are just they're difficult businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, that's not to just sit here and poo poo on food. Like, there's a lot of very successful business owners out there that own restaurants and have done it in food
There's not a
service.
lot. No, there
Um,
isn't. That's not true. The restaurant business is fraught
well,
with failure.
the way it works in franchising with food, a lot of people don't realize this, especially with the big name brands that we all recognize. McDonald's, for example, they don't have as many unique franchisees as you would think. They have a bunch of mega franchisees that have private equity money, venture capital money behind them, and they're big, just multi-$100 million organizations. They own, you know, 93 McDonald's and 18 Taco Bells and 23 Pizza Huts. They build a portfolio.
Out of curiosity, and I don't know the latest stats, I'm wondering how much an average McDonald's actually brings in for the owner.
Yeah. In terms of net, That's a good question. I want to say this may be a year or two dated, but what we call AUV, average unit volume for McDonald's, is somewhere around like 3.5 million, maybe, which is
That's
comparatively speaking
revenue.
revenue. Yeah,
Yeah, but
revenue.
what does the owner
It's
actually
it's
get?
probably somewhere in the 6 to 8% range net is what I would guess.
So 3 million, 8% would be 240 grand.
Somewhere in that range, yeah.
And your business is open from 6 in the morning till midnight, multiple shifts of people,
Yeah.
all kinds of life experiences you got
Oh
to
yeah.
deal with.
Yeah, yeah.
And on top of that, how often do you have to refresh your restaurant,
Well, that's
right?
an important factor, right? Because there contractually you could be obligated to, yeah, do a brand refresh, update equipment, big capital investments like that.
Yeah.
So it's
That
it and
that's
there's
not a great business. I'll
no,
be honest, I
it's
don't want
not.
to work with a business that has less than 10% to the business owner.
Yeah.
Anything less than 10, you're on the verge of trouble.
Yep.
And the only reason they survive is volume, and they've done all the research to know that this will work. They
Yeah.
don't have as much of the ups and downs, but yeah, it's still not a great business model.
No, it's
Find a
not, and
good business model.
that's why they've evolved the way they have, where there may be a handful of kind of legacy McDonald's franchisees where it's been in the family for decades and they own one or two locations, but the vast majority of them, it's big ownership groups that have gotten together and rolled all these things up. So yeah, the margin of the business is not great, but if you're the majority owner of a franchisee organization that owns 100 McDonald's, at that scale, 'cause you're not in there in the day to day having to deal with all of it. Like at that scale, it's a little bit different than if you're just owning one or two of them. But that's where, like, I spend a lot of time trying to just, I guess, educate people and open their eyes to, like, hey, if you really want to look at this franchise thing, like, I understand why food is the first thing you thought of, but so many other types of businesses out there that can be more lifestyle friendly, but also the unit economics are a lot more attractive. And 240K net. We do that in one of our franchise businesses that we put $110,000 of total startup capital into, um and that business just keeps on trucking.
And that's the key. Like, why? So here's the thing. It is the weirdest thing in human nature, and I don't understand it. People want to make things hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to make things easy. Staples had that easy button. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's make our business easy. If you can figure out how to create a business that's open an hour a day and cash flows a couple hundred grand a year and has no employees, God bless you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
make it easy. Don't make
Yeah,
it
I mean,
difficult.
we do. I'm guilty of it. Like, I definitely overcomplicate things from time to time. My wife and I always joke. Um, we're like, man, this business ownership thing would be pretty easy if it weren't for customers and employees. They're necessary in most businesses, but there's so many different looks. There's so many different types of businesses that one could get into, and so like that's probably the single biggest piece of advice I give anyone, as we start working together, is just keep an open mind. Keep an open mind in terms of the types of businesses you would be willing to consider and learn more about, because there are, in most people's cases, there are so many different types of, I mean, in my world, franchises, but think about all the other types of businesses outside of franchising that someone could start today, with the online platforms and all the opportunities that come with that.
And there are a ton. I'll be honest, from what I see, boring, old,
Main Street
needed
businesses.
Main Street needed businesses,
Yeah.
meaning that you have to have it,
Yeah.
are the ones that tend to do well, or B2B.
Mhm.
B2B,
Yeah.
you have better margin usually than you do in the consumer, unless you're a non-essential in B2B. So like for
Right.
me, non-essential, I got to get my lawn mowed in a B2B type of a setting, but it's not essential to my business in the
Right. You
sense
can eliminate it if times really get tough.
you can eliminate it, but you're also not like, oh, I've got to have the best lawn mowing
True.
because it's
Yeah.
so important to my business. Whereas if I'm in a B2B business and I'm online, I need my tech up. I need it up all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because if my tech's down, my website's down, then I'm in trouble,
Nothing's happening.
right?
Yeah.
Nothing's happening. If I've got trucks, I need them operating and running.
Yeah.
So I'm more worried about a broken truck than I am whether the lawn got mowed today or yesterday and whether they edged perfectly.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
those
true.
kind of things that you have to think of it from the customer's viewpoint. And too often, I think we just think we have a great idea, and your friends and family all tell you it's a great idea, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And
The friend that should almost be a red flag. If all your friends and family are telling you it's a great business idea, that to me is almost a red flag. Like I think back to when we were looking at buying our first franchise, everyone thought we were crazy. Until like 2 years later when it was going really well and everyone's like, oh, we knew you could do it. So I mean, and I think that's part of it, right? With the human nature piece, like so many people are attracted initially to the sexier businesses, when in reality, some of these boring, necessity Main Street type businesses, they just, they're steady and constant, and they don't come and go the way some of these others do. Like I see fads in, fitness and you see it in restaurants and stuff where a new brand will come onto the scene and it's got all the bells and whistles and you got a ton of buzz around it, a lot of people talking about it, and that's great until it's not, when the next best fitness concept has come around.
And that's it. Certain businesses have a life cycle, but certain businesses are around forever.
Yeah.
Um, I don't notice fads in plumbing. Do you?
Nah, not so much. Not until they're building toilets with AI built into it and they can unclog themselves and self-diagnose. But no, you haven't seen a lot of trends in plumbing.
And
Um,
yet they get paid well.
they certainly do. They certainly do. Um, Want to make sure the audience has a sense. So you mentioned earlier that you're Profit First certified. For those that aren't familiar, give us kind of the overview of what is Profit First.
Profit first is the same concept as what everyone told you. Pay yourself first. Right now, this is not evil, mean. You don't not pay your bills. It's nothing like that. All right. People get
Yeah.
it's just simply the sense that when you go into business, you went into business to be profitable. If you can't take your profit when you make the sale and set it aside, there's something wrong with your business.
Yeah.
Now, most business owners, especially in the beginning, are afraid to pay themselves. They want to reinvest every dollar in the business. Okay, here's the thing. Have you ever made an investment where you didn't expect to get paid back?
Ever? No.
No. But yet, these people are investing in their business and they have no payback plan,
Mm.
no expected return, no proven path that if I make this investment, I'm actually going to get my money back. And when is it going to come back? And so they're not actually thinking through these choices. They're throwing money at everything, hoping something will work. And they're always struggling. And then they go home and they get screamed at because there's no money for the kids' lunch and the sports, and the lights are flickering, and
Yeah.
the vacation got canceled, and
But a lot of people, they think they're doing the right thing, right? Because there's so much of the advice out there is reinvest in your business, reinvest in your business.
do you know who says that?
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people doing it.
Yeah, there's one person who says that. The
Who's that?
sales guy showing you how to reinvest in your business. It
Okay.
could be the marketing sales guy, the equipment sales guy, the
Yeah,
front
that's true.
sign. Yeah, yeah. Who else is saying that? You need to invest in
I
your
mean,
business.
it just feels like one of those things you always hear.
Right, because all the salespeople are saying it.
Yeah, that's probably it. That's probably true. So, like with your clients, that come to work with you, they're all existing business owners for the most part, or exclusively, I would assume.
They are, unless they are a well-funded startup.
I got you. Okay.
If they've got funding and they've got a proven path to something, then sure, we'll sit with them.
Yeah.
Um, but normally they are existing business owners.
Right.
Some of them are franchisees, and they'll come to us. They're like, the franchisor says these are the numbers I'm supposed to hit, but they won't tell me how. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
we can
Oh,
figure
yeah. I
that.
believe that. I mean, look, I say it till I'm blue in the face on this podcast. Not all franchises are created equally, and there's franchisors out there, man, that they really don't care uh, how the franchisees are doing. They're there for the royalties, and look, every franchise is going to get their royalties. That's their business model. The royalties are their lifeblood. But the best franchisors really understand that in order for their business to continue being successful, they have to not only help their franchisees grow their business, but they have to put them in a position to do it in a profitable manner, and not nickel and dime them and constantly, be reaching into their piggy bank and chiseling away at their profit margin, because you're only going to be motivated but for so long, as a franchisee, and the growth is going to stop and the new franchise sales is going to stop. But that doesn't mean everyone's doing it that way. And you mentioned, because I guess what I was kind of leading to is like, when a typical client, when you work with, I assume the initial steps is kind of sitting down and getting a good analysis of where their business is at today. And then where do you normally start from there? I'm sure it varies depending on the client, the business, where their business is at. But what is a typical starting point? I know you mentioned earlier, having some metrics in place. Is it going back and figuring out what should the metrics and what are the key levers in this business?
Yeah. So two things. The first place we start is with the business owner. I need to understand their story, their desires, their wants, and where they're going. Most
Okay.
business owners have no idea. They've never examined themselves, their behaviors, or what they truly want from the business and why. So that's step one. Step two, we take their business and we lay it into our models, and we look at 16 leverage points that start with lead flow into the business and end with cash leaving the business back into the owner's pocket.
Okay.
All right. Everything in between, you can actually put metrics to, and you can figure out the math. That's what McDonald's does. McDonald's figures out the math, and they know that if I put a location here and I do XYZ, this is what I expect to get. And so we figure it out for their unique businesses because they don't have that data. They don't know all those particular metrics, but every business, there's a certain amount that apply. We look at cash flow. We help to make sure that their cash is going to flow and continue to flow, and we can predict the future to a certain extent, right? So
Yeah.
we help them figure out where they are, see where the bottlenecks are, remove the bottlenecks, and then predict the future. And that's basically what we do. So we help make their business easy so that everything flows like it's supposed to flow. And if they want to try things, then we play what if games within those metrics. Well, what
Mm.
if we do this? Well, if we do this, we got to do this, this, and this. So let's put all the numbers in for this, this, and this, and let's see the end result. And a lot of times they'll be like, I want to do this. I'm like, great, let's run the numbers. And I show them the numbers. They go, well, that sucks. I'm
I
like,
don't want
yeah,
to do that.
I don't want to do that. That's a lot of work for no return. I'm like, yeah, duh.
Yeah. I feel like that's a pretty common occurrence where what the business owner thinks they should be, whether it's their time or their money, investing in to reach a certain goal, it ends up being not the right thing at all, right? And they should really be putting their time into something totally different, or investing into something else if they really do want to hit that goal. I feel I know that's been the case in our businesses over the years. So I guess that's where really defining and understanding these different leverage points are. So, hey, if I pull on this lever, this is what I can expect to happen.
Exactly. And I think for most business owners, the issue is I don't know what I don't know.
Mm.
And so they haven't even thought through all the implications of the decision or what is involved in that particular decision. Um, and a lot of times, and this is what people don't realize, growth takes cash. And if you've got a bad business model, you will grow yourself to failure.
Yeah. Yeah. That for sure makes sense.
It does
That
to
that
you,
makes a
but it
lot of
doesn't
sense.
make sense to most people.
Well, it makes sense to me because we've been through that. If you remember the last time I came
Yeah.
on your podcast, I kind of analyzed the two different franchises that we've owned that on paper look pretty similar, right? In reality, one of them did not have a good cash flow model and required a ton of capital in order to keep growing. Whereas the other one, cash flow is great. It's the one we still own, by the way. Cash flow is great. And, we can keep growing that thing without having to just keep investing huge amounts of money right back into it.
And that's because you now seen how the math works in those businesses. The
Yeah,
reality is we could have probably modeled it all out up front and you could have made a decision then.
for sure. Yeah, no doubt. But yeah, I mean, as we were talking about some of the just different, things that would be good to map out ahead of time. I think a lot of times business owners just have to learn these lessons the hard way. I know that was the case with us. It was an insulation business that we owned, right? So it checked a lot of boxes, right? It's a needed thing. Every house, every building needs it, and that was part of our attraction to it. There were other things, but
How many people wake up in the morning and go, I think I need some new insulation today versus
well,
I think I want a cup of coffee.
it's usually after the coffee, right? But it's if it's an existing home, it's if you really need insulation, you're going to be able to tell when it gets real hot or real cold out.
Yes.
And then the part of the reason the cash flow was so bad in that business for us was we were primarily doing new construction. So we were working with builders, and those builders, I've never heard the phrase checks in the mail so many times until I started doing work for home builders. But so what are some things? I mean, we've covered a lot here today. Are there you talk about these 16 different leverage points. Are there like 2 or 3 areas that you see most commonly as being some of the bottlenecks in a business? Is it lead flow, sales?
Every business has its own issues, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Lead flow and getting new leads is always an issue many times. Second one is appropriate pricing. And appropriate
Yeah.
pricing might be a problem in you don't understand your costs.
Mm.
or you don't understand what it takes to deliver, so you have the wrong price, or you just think people aren't going to pay
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
amount of money, or you're afraid to ask for it.
Yep.
So it's price. And then the third issue, more often than not, actually, the other two issues that come up: inefficient operations
Believe that.
and then managing cash. Um, uh, I will tell you, overwhelmingly, most business owners know how to generate cash.
Hmm.
Almost none of them know how to hold on to cash.
Yeah.
And so those are probably the four biggest, but within those four are the other 12 leverages that
Right.
fall underneath them to say, okay, which part of that is the problem? And then how do we fix it? And I think that's the other thing that makes us different. We don't just go, oh, there's your problem. We help brainstorm how to fix it. We
Yeah.
don't blame the owner and go, it's more, hey, we tried this, let's try that. What are some ideas? What are the competitors doing? How can we change from where we are today to where we want to be? Change takes time. That's the reality of it. But over time, we can help business owners come to the point where one day they say to me, we've never had so much cash in the business. What are we supposed to do with it? I'm like, take it out, go have fun,
What are
build
yeah,
wealth.
that's the whole point at the end of the day, isn't it? Right. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, most of the people I work with, the freedom is what they're looking for, right? So there's a financial component to that. There's a lifestyle and a time component to that. But without both of them, you don't really have that freedom. If you got, all the time in the world, but your business isn't making any money and you're constantly stressed about that, you're not feeling free. You're not probably enjoying a lot of that extra time that you have, and vice versa. So do you have any last kind of, I guess, question for me, and then we can start wrapping this up? But do you have any recommendations? Again, I'm sure it depends on the type of business, but as to like how much cash reserves a business should have on hand. Like I had someone on a week or so ago that said, at minimum, most businesses should have at least 10% of like their annual revenue in cash reserves at any point in time. Any thoughts on
It depends on the business.
yeah, yeah.
The question is, how long can you go through a storm
Mhm.
and
Right,
survive?
right.
So it's not just the business, it's you at home.
Mhm.
Like, do you have the reserves to go 6 months without a paycheck at home?
Yeah,
And then, you know, let's face it, we all went through COVID. Nobody predicted COVID,
yeah,
but here it is. COVID was one of a million things that can go wrong.
yeah,
It
yeah.
might be something that affects the entire world or just your world.
Mhm.
And you got to be able to survive those things.
Yeah,
And so the question is, what do you need to be able to sleep and survive, whether it's in or out of the business, but available? Too often, I think people depend on credit in those situations, and it's in those moments that credit disappears. So you got to
right.
have
Yeah,
cash.
yeah, yeah. Yep, that's a really good point. Well, you guys do have a unique approach from everything that I've seen out there. Love the way you come in and help a business owner kind of analyze where they're at and what they really need to focus on, but then the actual tactical help to help them solve those problems instead of just helping them figure out the problems and then they're left to themselves to do something about it. So where should people go if they want? I know you're very active with your podcast and live streams and posting on social. So where should people go if they want to hear more from you? If they're interested in potentially, working with you as a client, where should we point them?
Everything is on the website,
Okay.
profitcomesfirst.com.
Love it. That'll be right at the top of the show notes. Make it super easy for people to find. But Rocky, I really appreciate you, man. I learn something from you every single time that we talk, and I know the audience will have a lot of great takeaways from this as well. So keep doing what you're doing, man. Helping business owners get what they actually want to get out of business ownership, and less of the headaches and more of the time and the money.
Thank you so much for having me.
Always a pleasure, Rocky. Thank you.